The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports. You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks.
Thrilled to be joined here on the show by Jake Butt of the Big Ten Network, former tight end at Michigan. We will talk about Oregon's tight end because he's all fired up.
I'm on the
about
Mackey board. I'm on the Mackey board. So,
hey, listen to that.
My voice does carry weight, believe it or not.
That's why we brought him on the show mostly. It's just to start the Kenny and Sadiq hype train. But I want your thoughts on Oregon coming into this season off a Big Ten championship. You know, you're not as close to the program maybe, or don't talk about it every day like I do. So what's your kind of 30,000-foot view of where you think the Ducks are coming into this year?
Well, first off, I'm excited. We don't get our full season schedule, but I will have the opener against Montana State at home. So,
and apparently that's going to be a barn burner of a game because we learned at Idaho last year blowouts are not guaranteed.
You know, up in the booth, we always like competitive games. It gives us something to talk about, but I understand the fan. I don't know. Montana State's a good program.
Really
They're
good.
going to come
really,
to play,
really good.
And that's their Super Bowl, their national title. But, I mean, it's just going to be the truth. You can ask me this question this year, next year, as long as Dan Lanning's there, probably for the foreseeable future, like Oregon's here to stay. You know, before the Big Ten expanded out west, you talk about the top of the conference, and it was Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and then there's, you know, some teams that would get in the mix. Now it's Oregon. That name is right in there firmly, and coming off an undefeated season, you win the Big Ten, and I think people were concerned, like, hey, you know, does Oregon will they have to adapt to the Big Ten? I watched the tape last year, and Oregon is so good, and it's going to be the case once again. They dictate the terms of the game. Teams have to adapt to them, and that's the state of the program. To me, it seems like if I had to bet, defense will probably lead the way, right, this year. You know, you're breaking in a new quarterback, and that's obviously going to be a topic of conversation, but I don't have concerns about that. I look at Bo Nix, the strides he took coming to Oregon and getting in this system. Completion percentage significantly jumped, even a jump in year 2 when he went on that Heisman campaign. I expect the same for Dante Moore, once that's confirmed. But to me, it looks like this is going to be a defensive-led team. Thieneman, love him. What you guys did in the transfer portal, the secondary, love him. Uiagalelei across the defensive line, maybe one of the best, if not the best, pass rusher. There's no weaknesses. And then the offensive line is going to be the foundation and stability of the offense as you're introducing a new quarterback and introducing some of these new faces outside.
Yeah, in the Big Ten landscape, you know, there was a preseason poll recently that picked Oregon 3rd, which is where I have them in my preseason Big Ten rankings, and I have Penn State 1st and Ohio State 2nd. Do you think that's an appropriate place for those teams to be?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'd even give credit to Illinois. I think they're firmly in the mix.
They are my preseason number 4 team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, that should be everybody's top 4 right there. Absolutely. You know, Illinois is a team that's extremely experienced. Also, returning both coordinators is key. You know, you're out here Big Ten Media Days. Yeah. You're asking the head coaches about new coordinators. You're learning a new language, a new system. So having coordinator continuity is key. But, right there, number 3. Any of those 3, 4, 5 teams has a chance to compete for a title.
Does it surprise you that Oregon came into the Big Ten and won it in their first year and is, you know, just kind of immediately expected to be at the top of the conference every year in your view?
Doesn't surprise me at all. And, you know, it's an arms race in today's landscape, and it takes commitment, it takes alignment. Oregon has the resources. They have the leader in Dan Lanning. I think having a younger coach is extremely valuable in today's landscape from a recruiting standpoint, being able to communicate and relate to guys in the portal. So it does not surprise me. I think there's going to be many, many more years to come for success. And ultimately, Oregon's going to want to win a national championship. That's just the truth. So there's only one team that wins that every year. So that can't mean when you fall short of the national championship that it becomes a disappointing year. That was a phenomenally great year.
That can be a tough sell to Oregon fans sometimes, but I get it.
But it takes time. You know, my time at Michigan, we had some really good teams, and fell short. It took time to get over that ledge. Even Ryan Day with Ohio State, it took time. Kirby Smart at Georgia, it took time. I would choose to look at the positive and say they have the systems in place that allow them to have a chance at the end of the year. There's going to come a point in time where they get over the hump.
The Big Ten, like the Pac-12, RIP, as it used to be, has just got so much history and tradition and just a really, really strong football culture. And you see a lot of that every single year. How do you think Oregon's entrance into the Big Ten with last season and what they're expected to do this year, how is that kind of being received in Big Ten country?
I think it's welcomed, and even just past Big Ten country. Who doesn't want to watch Ohio State, Oregon? Who wasn't sitting there on the edge of their seat, watching that game? Who isn't excited to see a rivalry, Oregon State, or even Oregon-Washington, a competitive game there at the end of the season? From a branding standpoint, I'd actually even kick it back to you. Like when I think of Oregon Ducks, I think of speed, sexy uniforms.
Yeah.
Growing up now with the college football games back in place, everyone wanted to play with Oregon because of the speed and the uniforms. I'd even just kick it to you. Like, what is something that Big Ten fans should know about Oregon from a historical standpoint?
Well, I think that when you look at all the changes that college football's undergone in the last 15, 20 years, whatever has been required, Oregon has adapted. You come into the Big Ten, the narrative in that conference is, hey, it's about physicality, it's about toughness, and Oregon goes out and wins the league. And when it was, the facilities race in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, Oregon was right there at the forefront. And the uniforms, that's something that Oregon, of course, really, really started and has been a major recruiting tool. I talk to Brian Smith, our recruiting guy here at the Locked On Network all the time. Mm-hmm. And, I'll say, like, what does someone in Alabama recruit like Naeem Offord? I don't know if it's Naeem specifically, but just as an example, like what does a kid from that part of the country know about Oregon uniforms every time, right? Like it's an identifier.
It does matter.
Yeah, it does.
It really does matter.
For all the flack and crap that Oregon and Oregon fans have taken from, mostly Washington and Oregon State fans, I think over the years, USC as well, for all that, like they did it for a reason. It has clearly worked. And then you get to the NIL and the transfer portal era, and Oregon's a top tier NIL school, and Oregon's having a lot of success in the transfer portal. They still recruit high school kids really well. Like whatever change you've thrown at Oregon in college football, they've just kind of been there. And so, there's a bill that might go through Congress that could change college sports again, and the NIL, like there's just all this stuff. And frankly, I get exhausted trying to keep up with it on Locked On College Football.
Yeah.
It can be exhausting, quite frankly, but it matters. But I don't have any worry as an Oregon fan, because I look at it and go, every single change, and they haven't all been the same. Whatever's been needed, Oregon's going to adapt. You're going to a more physical conference. Here's an offensive line that can, hold up against Abdul Carter and Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. Here's a defensive line that can, cause enough havoc to beat the eventual national champions, right? Like they always have shown an ability to just adapt to wherever the landscape of college football goes.
Adaptability is key, and I said this last year, and I don't know if I said it as clear when I was calling the Maryland game, which is, Oregon, you thought, and this didn't mean Oregon wasn't tough or physical, but a decade ago when you thought Oregon, you think speed and finesse, right?
And I think that was fair.
I think they do it all now, though.
Yeah,
the speed and finesse is still there, but there was a brand of physicality, and maybe that's a value of having a defensive-minded head coach, too. There was a brand and a physicality that showed up on tape. The only area you guys are missing, better airport. We need a better airport, because if it matters for us as analysts, the recruits, too, we need a...
Do you fly into Eugene or Redmond?
I've done both. Okay. And even Portland, I want to say, I might have done Portland.
The Redmond airport, I find to be phenomenal.
Okay.
I
don't think I did the Redmond.
So Redmond is so easy, man. I'm telling you, security is 5 minutes.
How far is it from campus?
Maybe like an hour and a half or so, roughly. So it's a
Maybe
little.
Check it out.
Yeah, it's a little.
Week 1 game.
Yeah, it's a little bit further. I can't let you go before asking about Kenyon Sadiq, because I think the entire Oregon fan base, I talked about him earlier this week on the show. I've talked about him a lot in the offseason. Dan Lanning told Eric Skopel the other day that, he's someone who he sees as being a focal point of the offense. Like, Oregon has sneakily been really good at the tight end position over the years. Terrence Ferguson, Ed Dixon, Johnny Munt had a nice career in the NFL. Farrell Brown as well.
Farrell Brown. I mean, what a great story, too.
Oh, awesome that he came back. And I'm pretty sure he's still bouncing around the NFL.
I saw him at tight end university,
Yeah. So Kenyon Sadiq is different than all of those guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's what is so exciting is he just learned from one of the best tight ends Oregon's ever had, who was a second-round pick in Terrence Ferguson. And he brings an athletic profile that is, I mean, they run tunnel screens and fly sweeps to this guy.
Yeah.
But then you can watch him, you know, one of my favorite moments of his in the Big Ten championship game was not one of his touchdowns. He came across on a wham block and put Abdul Carter on his rear end. And it's like, that's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
And he can do all that sort of stuff. So when you watch someone who played tight end and maybe wasn't exactly like Kenyon Sadiq, when you watch him, what is so special to you?
I was going to say, I mean, I did, not to toot my own horn, I did win the Mackey, but I had no type of, it looked completely different to what, I wasn't hurdling people. I wasn't running past people. But he's explosive, and he's got such a unique skill set that I think one of the big positives is you have a play caller that has the creativity to know how to use a weapon like that in Coach Stein, because you could truly line him up anywhere. He could be a slot receiver. He could line up as the solo receiver backside. He can line up in the backfield as a fullback. You could give him a toss, honestly. You could do like a tight end reverse, like what we've seen with Kittle. He's just that athletic. And I do think he's got a chance to compete for the Big Ten Tight End of the Year and win a Mackey, especially considering you guys, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden to the NFL, right? You lose Evan Stewart. I understand you brought in some transfers, a couple five-star freshmen. The roster is loaded with talent. But in terms of a proven known commodity, it's Kenyon Sadiq right now. That is that, and also introducing a new quarterback. Just naturally, you know, our routes, we line up attached to the tackle. So at the top of our routes as a tight end, I'm saying you end up closer to the quarterback, right? Instead of if you're on the right hash and you have, you know, someone running a 15-yard stop route, that's a 40-yard pass through the air from hash to outside the numbers. If you're running a tight end, you're running a 10-yard out. That's only really a 15-yard pass. It's much more available and friendly to a new quarterback that you're introducing. So I'm excited for him. He's going to put up big-time numbers. I love that they're talking about him as a focal point of the offense. So I will start the Kenyon Sadiq Mackey train week 1. That's my challenge to him, 100 yards. If we can get to 100 yards, I'll start the Kenyon Sadiq Mackey train very early, if not right now.
That's what we love to hear. I feel like Dante Moore will see him early on, maybe as a security blanket, and you know, depending on where he lines up, I think there can be, you know, there's a joke in the NFL of Kirk Cousins used to chuck it up, screw it, Justin Jefferson's down there somewhere. I think I would love to see just a couple of those balls to Kenyon Sadiq because he's 6'4". He's up to about 250 pounds. He's still athletic.
Is he compact?
He can
strong.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, we've been seeing him walking around. You wouldn't really know. He doesn't. He doesn't necessarily look 250 until you stand like right next to him. And you're like, wow, that's just a unique sort of physical profile. So the Kenyon Sadiq hype train will be started by this guy right here, Jake Butt, Big Ten Network. Appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Some concerning symptoms puts Bill Self in the hospital. Scary news.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Here is the news in case you missed it. This was a release from KU Athletics about Bill Self. They said, Kansas men's basketball coach Bill Self felt unwell and experienced some concerning symptoms on Thursday. He was transported to Lawrence Memorial Hospital, where he had 2 stents inserted. The procedure went very well, and he is expected to make a full recovery. He is in good spirits and expects to be released from the hospital soon. So all that at the end is obviously very well. procedure went well. He's expected to make full recovery, in good spirits, expected to be released from the hospital soon. Like, that is obviously all good news for Kansas and Bill Self. And of course, this comes a couple of years after the 2023, I don't know what the proper term would be for this situation, whatever, that forced him to miss the rest of the Big 12 tournament, miss the NCAA tournament, where he had some sort of heart issue where he had to go in and I think get a stent done for that specifically. Now, I don't know for sure. Maybe you could connect dots and say, hey, if he had to get a stent for his heart in 2023, maybe you would say, I don't know, does that increase the likelihood that you would just assume that's what it's going to revolve around in 2025? It's not a guarantee, though. You can get stents in a lot of different things throughout your body. You can get it for, something as major as your heart with one of your valves. You can get it for something as major as, like, I think with your brain, like involving like strokes. You can get it for, I don't want to say minor. Anytime you're getting a stent, anytime you're getting something that is involving opening up, what is it, like blood vessels or whatever? Like, obviously that is a very, important. That is a very like scary, I guess, situation for you and your family to be in. But there are other parts that, like, if you have maybe a blood clot, possibly very dangerous situation. Obviously, if you have a blood clot, but the recovery from maybe having a blood clot and then figuring that out and like what your procedure is, what your the things you have to do as an outpatient are going to be a little bit different than if you got a stent done because your heart, something to your heart was blocked, right? So there are different kind of levels of this that we don't entirely know, like what it all is. And again, the fact that procedure went very well, expected to make full recovery, in good spirits, expected to be released from the hospital. Like, that's all great news for Kansas. That's all great news for Bill Self. That's all great news for his family. And like I said earlier, like I feel bad even doing this. Like, we should probably just cut the episode here. Like, there's the news. Like, boom, we're moving forward. At the same point in time, I know you come here for analysis. I know you might be listening to, okay, what does this exactly mean? And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if I wait to talk about what does this mean for a week, is that okay? But it's not okay right now? Or is this a situation where it's like when is the right time, right, to talk about it? Because at some point we do have to talk about, what does this mean? Does it, handicap how long his coaching career could be at Kansas? Like, where does KU kind of go from here? So I do want to at least touch on that stuff while trying to be as sensitive to the situation as possible and understanding that the most important thing here is that Bill Self is healthy for him, for his family, for his own health. And that is what you're hoping out of all of this in a silly basketball game, or who's going to be the coach of the Kansas basketball team. Like, those sort of things, those can get figured out later. We're going to talk a little bit about them because that's what we do here on the show. But that is obviously the most important thing. Is Bill Self healthy for him and his family? So let's kind of switch gears and get to some of that stuff. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So again, Bill Self hospitalized concerning symptoms was the exact quote that was given by Kansas Athletics. And obviously that can be a lot of different things, right? And obviously it was concerning enough to get a couple stints in there. So a good thing that everything was done in kind of an orderly and timely manner here. So, I mean, from a health perspective, obviously this is a huge deal. If we're talking about impact on the basketball season, which, as I said earlier, obviously pales in comparison to his health for him and his family. But this could be something that has, no impact on the season, on however long the rest of his coaching career is, ranging to the extreme of having a severe impact that very much handicaps the rest of Bill Self's coaching career in terms of limiting the amount of years or games coached that there could possibly be. And like I said earlier, part of what makes this difficult is you don't exactly know what the stints are for. You can assume one thing, you can assume something else, but like there are different severities to, what this could be. The lower range of severities that he's back on the sideline, ready to go for the start of the season, it has no impact. The other end of severities is that, like, and I hate to even like bring this up because this is like the worst case scenario, right? Is there has to be at least a non-zero chance, could be 0.01%. I don't know, that like Bill Self has already coached his last game on the sidelines of Kansas. Again, I think that's an unlikely scenario. That's not one that I'm pointing to, though. I have no idea. I'm not looking at the, medical charts, and nor would I know what I was looking at if I was. But I think the natural question here would be, does this increase the likelihood of early retirement, so to speak, for Bill Self? There was already some is scuttlebutt the right term? I don't know. People discussing, could this upcoming season be Bill Self's last year at Kansas? And I have no idea if there was truth to that or what. I also kind of was someone who you could convince either way, that like, if you told me he had so much fun coaching Darren Peterson, he's like, I'm going to come back for another year after that, versus, maybe, I don't know. Do you see it as like a send-off year? I have no idea. Now, if it was a plan to be like, this is going to be my last season, does it speed up that timeline, or does it cement it? Does it guarantee that that's going to be the situation? I just can't help but think, you go back to the 2023 situation, and obviously if this is heart related, obviously the 2023 one was, we'll see what this one is. But it's hard for me not to think like about the stresses that a college basketball, any college coach undergoes, just in general, but especially in today's day and age of everything going on, because it's not a situation anymore where, okay, well, I'm going to go take a month off trip during the off season. There is no off season anymore. There's constantly, you're working on, the transfer portal. You're working on high school recruiting. You're working on NIL. You're working on raising funds for your NIL for your current players and your future players. You're working on, oh no, this player just came into my locker room and is now asking for, $100,000 more because they think they're better than this other player on the team. And they ended up, talking it out and figuring out that, hey, he's making more than I am, and I want to be making as much, if not more than he is. Like, there's so much more you have to deal with from a stress level. And then think about the standpoint of like recruiting now, where it used to be about maybe this or that. And now it maybe is a bit more about the dollars and cents, to where the back and forths with agents, the ups and downs of recruiting, the, hey, they're going to come and then they don't, the situations of feeling like you got fished a little bit. Like, that's going to happen more often in the current structure. And that is very, very stressful. So you wonder if it does speed things up. Because you can just think it's an every day of the year job now, and it's very stressful each and every probably one of those days. Now, even if this is more of a minor thing, like I said, where he is back coaching the first game of the season and it doesn't have an impact there, it has to at least get you thinking as an individual, like, hey, this is starting to happen more often now. It at least makes you look in the mirror a little to be like, okay, how long do I want to do this? How long do I have in me? It starts to become more of a question. And it's like, would I be better off just not having these stresses and going, living on a beach somewhere and just fishing, and I can watch the occasional college basketball game if I really want to, So it'll be very, very interesting, right? And so I don't know what the impact is. Certainly this doesn't lengthen the time that you would think he's going to be a head coach. I should also mention, though, I do remember like Coach K went through all sorts of medical stuff over the course of the back, I don't know what, like decade, 15 years of his coaching career at Duke. And he still was bouncing through that stuff, and then he'd find his way back on the sideline. So there is no guarantee that this has an impact at all. Like, maybe it just revitalizes, I guess, Bill Self to where he's like, he misses not being out there when he doesn't have the opportunity to do so. But obviously it is a very scary situation.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Gametime Zone Deals pick the best deals in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concerts and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Notre Dame just landed one of their top quarterback targets in the class of 2027.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Notre Dame just landed Teddy Gerard, a 4-star quarterback in the class of 2027, who could be the future face of the program. So I'm going to give you the full breakdown of his game, how the Irish landed him, and what it means for the future of the quarterback room. Then we're going to zoom out and talk about how Marcus Freeman has completely changed the game when it comes to quarterback recruiting. Names like Kenny Minchey, CJ Carr, and now Teddy Gerard show just how much the standard has been raised at Notre Dame. Finally, we're going to dive into the latest twist in the recruitment of Elijah Golden. Notre Dame's top target left on the board in the class of 2026. He pushed his commitment date back 2 weeks, which is usually a red flag, but I still like where the Irish are at. I'm going to explain why at the end. But first, let's dive into Teddy Gerard's background, his recruiting profile. So he's listed at 6'3", 190 pounds, and he plays for North Cobb High School. He's from Kennesaw, Georgia. And right now, he is ranked as the number 15 quarterback in the country and the number 195 player overall on the 24/7 Sports Composite. But the rankings are kind of all over the place. That's why I like to go with the composite to try to average them all out. But Rivals has Gerard as the number 2 quarterback in the class and the top 100 prospect. Meanwhile, 24/7 Sports in their own rankings have him pegged as a 3-star and the number 18 quarterback in this class. This isn't that uncommon to have such an extreme disparity in rankings among services because he's still very young. He still has 2 more high school seasons to play before he even steps foot on campus. But Gerard's stock has really skyrocketed over the summer. He's been to a bunch of different camps. He was a top performer at Ohio State's 7-on-7 camp. He also performed really well at the Rivals camp a few weeks ago. We had Lockdown recruiting insider Brian Smith on the show, who was at the Rivals camp. He said he was really impressed by what he saw from Teddy Gerard. And the important thing here is that the Notre Dame coaching staff identified Teddy Gerard and Peyton Houston as their top 2 quarterback prospects in this class, and they were able to land him. So this is a big win for Gino Guidugli, Mike Denbrock, Marcus Freeman, the entire Notre Dame coaching staff. And their approach to quarterback recruiting in this class has been interesting, to say the least, right? I've been pretty critical of the approach, but it worked out in the end. So, I can question Gino's process here, but it ultimately worked out because they got their guy. So it's been well documented that Notre Dame waited until June 21st of this year to extend a single scholarship offer to any quarterback in the class of 2027. This is pretty uncommon because usually quarterback recruiting, that cycle is heavily advanced and guys commit very early on in their process. So guys are already starting to commit to different schools by the time Notre Dame had even offered anyone. And they only picked 2 guys. They kind of went all in on Gerard and Peyton Houston. And at this point, it looks like Peyton Houston is going to commit elsewhere. And this is just a big change from the previous cycle when they already had Noah Grubbs committed by June 1st of last year. And the reasoning that we had heard was that they wanted to evaluate all these guys in person, and their timelines were pushed back a little bit because of the run to the national championship. They went deep into the calendar, obviously, played the 16th and final game of the college football season, so they had to make up some ground on the recruiting trail. But ultimately, Notre Dame was able to make up ground quickly with Gerard, despite the fact that they offered him pretty late in the process. And ultimately, Teddy picked Notre Dame over Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. At one point, it felt like Clemson was the leader for Gerard, but they landed a commitment from Kareem Hewley on July 10th. And once that happened, Teddy narrowed down his list. And ultimately, the relationships with the Notre Dame staff were a key factor here. And Teddy has made it clear in interviews he wants to go to a place where he can compete for the job early, and that might be possible at Notre Dame depending on how Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert develop. And even though Notre Dame waited a really long time to offer Teddy Gerard, they were obviously in pretty consistent communication with him leading up to this process. The one thing that I will give Gino and the staff credit for and the way that they handled this was they were very transparent to all the quarterbacks that they were recruiting, that they were going to approach it a little bit differently. They were going to wait to extend that offer, and they were only going to extend it to a few guys early on. So at least the communication was what it should be, and I think that's a big reason why they were able to land Gerard here just a few weeks after they officially offered him a scholarship. So what is Notre Dame getting in Teddy Gerard? A guy who already has a lot of playing experience, despite the fact that he's only a rising junior at the high school level. He started on the varsity team as a true freshman, which is a big accomplishment in and of itself. Like, I can't even imagine playing and starting varsity as a true freshman. Now, granted, I'm not nearly as good of an athlete as Teddy Gerard is, and I was 5'2", 105 pounds soaking wet when I started high school. Luckily, I grew a little bit, but when I first started playing high school football when I was a freshman, I remember walking in on the first day of weight training in the summer, and some of the seniors looked at me like I was psychotic, like I was a sixth grader shadowing for whatever reason. Then I actually stepped in the weight room. They're like, oh my God, this poor kid is actually signing up to play. That was 1 year, finally hit my growth spurt, kinda. I'm still not very, very tall, but that was just, it's funny to look back and think about, wow, there's no way I could have started on varsity as a true freshman. Meanwhile, Teddy Gerard is doing it at quarterback, and he performed well his freshman season. He completed 153 of 260 passes, which is right around 59% for over 2,000 yards and had 18 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. But he followed up that season with a breakout year as a sophomore, in which he completed 209 of 291 passes, which is a nearly 72% completion percentage, a big increase from his freshman season, threw for over 2,600 yards, 31 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. Shout out to my guy, Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated for the stats there. So clearly, based on this progression from his freshman year to his sophomore year, you can tell that Gerard is becoming way more accurate. And I think a big reason why is his work ethic. Everything you hear about him, he has really intense work ethic, and it's starting to show on the field. So you think about how much he's progressed from his freshman year to his sophomore year. Just think, if he stays on that trajectory, how good he could be by the end of his senior season in high school. I think in time, he's going to have to get stronger, develop more power, but he's off to a great start. And even though his high school doesn't use him a lot in the designed run game, I think he's a very good scrambler. Watching his film, it honestly kind of reminds me of Ian Book and his ability to escape pressure. He has a knack for getting first downs, and when guys get in the backfield, he has a nice spin move, which is a signature of Ian Book. He can get out of the pocket, and he continues to look downfield. There's this great play where he rolls out to his right. He has a ton of time to throw. He's literally yelling to the wide receiver who is on the left side of the field while Gerard is on the right hash to go downfield, go to the end zone. Gerard lofts it up. Receiver makes a great play for a touchdown. But it's those kinds of plays that get you excited. Sometimes he has a tendency to throw off his back foot, but I think that's just because he's such a good athlete. He knows that he can still make the throw. He's going to get better at that in time. Again, he is still so young, and when he sets his feet and throws, he rifles the ball in there. So he's a really exciting prospect. And I personally think that Gerard has a little bit more potential, like a higher ceiling than Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert. But those guys will be on campus well before Gerard, especially Blake Hebert, who's already been on campus at Notre Dame. So I do think that Gerard is going to have a chance to compete for the job early on in his career, because think about it this way. Whoever wins the quarterback competition, whether it be CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, they're going to be the starter, hopefully, in 2025, 2026, maybe even 2027. I mean, I guess the best case scenario would be that whoever wins this job ends up starting the next 3 years. But if they're really, really good, then they're probably going to leave for the NFL after 2026. But again, that is a long way down the road. But say they wait until 2027, right? Or they're around Notre Dame until 2027. That would be down to Grubbs, Hebert, and now Gerard. And considering Grubbs and Hebert are both looked at as developmental prospects, like who knows where they will be at that point in their career. And obviously this is a really long way. Who knows what's going to happen. But I think if Gerard develops how the staff hopes that he will, I think he's going to have a chance to compete to be the starter in his second year, which is 2028. Again, a long way down the road, but I think that's how his career projects at Notre Dame. He is now the third commit in the class of 2027. Sean Kraft was technically the first as a long snapper, and then linebacker Ellis McGaskin was the second, but it is very important to have your quarterback committed very early on, so then you can build the class around him. It becomes a much more enticing pitch to wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends when they know who their quarterback is going to be, especially when the quarterback is as good as Gerard. And it sounds like he's going to be a very active recruiter as well, which is what you want out of your quarterback. Like, I've been a little bit critical of how Notre Dame went all in on Noah Grubbs very early, and they turned down Dia Bell, who is now a 5-star and committed to Texas. But one thing that you have to give Noah Grubbs a ton of credit for is that he has recruited his ass off to get other players to commit to Notre Dame. Like, whenever you hear about receivers and running backs committing, they all talk about how Noah was a big part of their recruitment and just how he was on them all the time talking up Notre Dame. So that is what you want in your quarterback commit. It looks like that's what Notre Dame is getting in Teddy Gerard, because these guys travel all around the country. They're going to a bunch of different camps. They're going to all these like elite showcases and things like that. And they're going to be competing with the best recruits in the country. So if you have a player like that committed this early on, especially at quarterback, it helps a ton. So overall, I didn't love the process to get here, but I love the end result because Notre Dame won big by getting Teddy Gerard to commit. So hats off to Gino Guidugli, man. I was critical of him and how he approached this process, but he got his guy. It's a big win for him and this Notre Dame team.